Hello everyone and welcome to The Green Flame, the Deep Green Resistance broadcast that brings you radical analysis, practical skills, and artistic expression from the revolutionary movement to defend the planet and rebuild just human communities. I am your host and comrade Max Wilbert. And for this episode of The Green Flame, we will host a group discussion on the topic of nuclear waste. Our discussion group met recently and discussed a film looking at the issue of nuclear waste. And nuclear waste, for those who don't know, is a massive issue. It's actually a much more serious danger in the nuclear industry than a meltdown or some Chernobyl type incident. Nuclear waste is something that's ubiquitous in the nuclear industry, and nobody really knows what to do with it. There's no safe way to store it. There's nothing that can be done to safely, quote unquote, dispose of material that will be deadly for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years into the future. So our discussion this week is on this topic of nuclear waste, which in many ways is a fascinating insight into industrial civilization, how it functions, the mindset of the technocrats that run the largest corporations in the world, the militaries, and so on. So I think you will enjoy this discussion. Let's get right to it.
So Ocean Poubelles is a documentary about nuclear waste disposal in the ocean. The filmmakers investigate what happened to the barrels of irradiated material that were dumped into the ocean in the past. And they also look into discharges of nuclear waste and visit communities that have been affected. So to start off, I wanted to go around and have everybody answer the question of what part of the film was the most powerful for you and why. So I guess I can get started in answering that question. For me, what really stood out was this line, "The solution to pollution is dilution," which to me just kind of encapsulated the whole mindset and the idea that people were so, doing things that would have such a long-term effect and not doing it with any real knowledge of what was going on or what they were causing. And yeah, just like the tragedy and all that, but I don't really think that mindset has changed a lot since. I think that's often the way that, everything is going. So yeah, that really stood out for me. Does anyone want to go next? Trinity?
Sure, I can go next. For me, it was seeing the pipes in the ocean, and seeing the rippling radiation coming out of it, and then as it pans out, you see all the things that the activists have done to it to try to raise awareness, and you realize that these people have put themselves in this terrible, terrible mortal danger to do something that no one else is paying attention to, and that was it for me.
Okay, I'll go next. Hey everyone, this is Ross. The most powerful part for me was, there's a couple of points in the documentary that just makes things blindingly obvious how people with the mindset of profit and money at all costs will do anything they can to get around laws or any resistance, and they'll bypass anything in any way possible. I think the scene in particular where he gets him to openly admits that, yeah, it's okay if some kids die of leukemia. We've got to keep the lights on, we've got to keep making money, we've got to keep those jobs. It's all about the jobs. Yeah, so just the blunt kind of, I suppose, morally bankrupt kind of compassionless, heartless mentality of people involved in high up in these organizations and involved in kind of enabling the status quo.
Hi, I'm Arti, and I can go next. I just wanted to add to Ross's. I think the most powerful part for me was also similar to what you described. In particular, it was the part when the government official is like, this is a cost benefit analysis we do in every single field. Like, they were kind of dismissive about it, although they were talking about kids with leukemia, kids dying early, and just not just kids, like people in general dying early. But he was like, yeah, it's just a cost benefit analysis. So like, this decision we have to make seemed very dismissive. And I know they do it, but I didn't expect to hear them say it so bluntly.
This is Jennifer, and I would say that it was the cumulative effect of the filmmakers themselves and the tone of the film that struck me. They were so honest, right down to, this is all we can afford as filmmakers to get to that one patch, to be able to look at that. And then I was struck by their presenting this information and all of the investigation that they did in a very non-manipulative manner. There was no emotional manipulation to it. It's here it is, we're giving this to you. And so that's what struck me, was the dedication and the tone of the film itself.
It is the resistance by Greenpeace, even as early as nearly 50 years ago. Yeah, but the debate, the controversy, the issue has even longer a history than the involvement of Greenpeace. And I have known a few other activist groups apart from Greenpeace who've been in the forefront of campaigning against nuclear energy, at least across Europe initially.
So the next question is, did you learn anything new in the film that surprised you?
New, not really, because I've been following these events again, given my age and experience for more than at least 3 decades. So nothing new as such. I think you might have also come across several such documentaries from Australia, from North America. I've also been keeping abreast and keeping in touch with the other documentaries that have been coming up every now and then. Right from 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl onwards. So nothing new in that sense, but very little people know about these things. That is the sad part of the story.
Yeah, I was really unaware of what was happening with nuclear waste disposal before I watched this documentary, but it has prompted me to look into more what's happening around me and in the world. And yeah, it's just, so a lot of it was new for me.
Okay.
Would like to go next.
Yeah, I guess, a lot of the information was new, but it was not really surprising in the sense that, I'm just used to assuming that, that's obviously the economy for them is more important than health. So I would say that was too much shocking, but all of the information was new, and really the fact that they just let it run into the ocean, deep in the ocean, it does not affect it. That was a pretty new thing. Yeah, I watched all of the information, but I guess that would be a bit surprising.
I have to agree with Salonika. I had heard of the barrels, but I had no idea that nuclear waste was just being piped into the ocean. I understood that a lot of the plants were placed along ocean fronts because they were using the water to cool, which meant that they were, just pumping the water back out. But I didn't know that it was so much more than that, because it's in the billions of gallons per day per plant that they need to cool these reactors. And as the oceans rise and things change, what does that mean for everything? And I thought that was like a pending thing. I didn't realize that it was just in the ocean no matter what already. That blew my mind.
I would really agree. I knew that the principle with everything is out of sight, out of mind, just like, make it disappear wherever. But it was horrible to realize that they just gone from this and all this protest for change into just straight out dumping and hiding the pipe. I mean, that's just, that transfer was something else to watch, and completely in line with the principles that they use for any kind of waste disposal.
A lot of the information was also quite new to me, but I wasn't surprised. They were surprised by most of them. There are 2 things that did surprise me, though. So the first one was how close to land the nuclear waste was dumped. I was expecting it to be further away, but it was like very close. And the second thing was, I think they talk about this particular academic, I think he's a professor at University of Manchester, and how he dismissed the increasing rates of leukemia in the area and said it was due to like population mixing or like some infection due to a virus, which he hadn't found evidence for. And another academic later on said that they had no evidence for that. I was surprised that an academic would just say that without having evidence about something so serious.
So I don't know a lot about the nuclear industry, so a lot of the facts themselves are quite new to me, but I suppose I'm never surprised anymore watching this kind of documentary when reading books about like the general psychopathy of the system, and just the brazen ecocide that's kind of just integral to all of, just constant basically, and just the lack of priorities. So yeah, a lot of this doesn't surprise me anymore. It's just, oh, it's that again. Oh, there's more. Oh, more ecocide. Okay. Oh, that's your priority, of course.
One thing that came to mind as this was being discussed is they weren't determining where they were dumping by actually going to depth. It was like, this is so hot that we've got to get it off the ship. Just drop it there, which for me is really telling about the whole waste for nuclear waste in and of itself. There's no way that you can take care of this. They just, no, get rid of it, get rid of it. Okay, so you pull the barrels off the bottom of the ocean. Where are you going to throw it next? It's just like, yeah, there's no solution to that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Creating a problem to which there is no solution. It's quite horrifying to watch. And at the same time, yeah, my experience as well was like, okay, this is absolutely terrible, but it is just what I've come to expect, because the pattern of this is just everywhere, the disregard and So the next question, which I guess ties into this, is, how does the topic of nuclear waste disposal relate to larger issues of consequences being forced onto future generations, short-sightedness in the pursuit of energy production, technological escalation, and the inevitable consequences? How can we relate this to larger topics, which I guess we've talked about quite a bit already, but would anybody like to go?
The one thing that actually struck me is that nuclear energy is called clean energy, and just the irony of it. We know what other forms of clean energy and renewables do to the environment, but this is like what this has done to just children's health, and that is like one of the basic things that most humans would just feel for. Like even a person who is a properly human supremacist would talk or would empathize with that, and this is what the clean energy does.
Yeah, adding on to what Salnika said, in addition to the negative effects seen on children, also negative effects on animals, like how one animal will eat another animal, and then they find damages in the animal that ate the other animal that had radiation poisoning, and it gets inherited. So that's it's just really starting a new long cycle of damage to animals. Yeah, not just humans, but yeah, it affects everyone eventually.
Yeah, I'd heard a scientist use that exact reality to critique the idea that the solution to pollution is dilution, that because everything lives off of the tiny things, it condenses in the larger bodies. And of course, if we eat seafood, it condenses in us. And so, like Salonika was saying, we think that it would begin to matter. Reality would start to materialize, but it's so clear that these people are not operating in reality. They're absolutely insane. There's just no reasoning with the people that were justifying this. They had just become like a refrigerator. I don't know how to describe that loss of reasoning ability.
I think for me, I hope that I'm answering this question, that there's no way that you can justify nuclear energy in any way whatsoever. I mean, you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't take care of this particular side product in any way that's going to preserve the natural world or ourselves. So it's just you don't, and you have to stop that. I mean, it's pretty clear cut. And all of those rationalizations based on profit margins and acceptable risks are just, like Trinity said, flat up insane. Doesn't make any sense at all.
Suresh, would you like to go?
So one or two things. Let us be very clear about the fact that the establishment, they know exactly what they're doing, and that is something which is the person who had filmed the documentary was actually trying to bring out. Whenever he went to the people concerned, asking them about more information and data, the way they were trying to cover up for the whole thing is evidence enough for all of us to know that the establishment knows exactly what they've been doing, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. Let's not be fooled by any of those things that we had heard from the people concerned, the authorities. So that is one thing. Secondly, we're talking about the British Isles, the Channel, and the seas around that they were talking about in the document. Those are not the only places around the world. These places have become radioactive in the 50s, way back in the 50s and 60s. And one example that I would like to cite, again in the UK, where the whole controversy actually exploded in the 60s and 70s, were two reactors by the name Sizewell and Windscale. So massive protests across the UK and Europe, and because it had a domino effect in France especially, which finally came to be called as the country of the atom, and dumping it into the channel, which is at 22 miles or something. And therefore, after these protests, the administration in Britain came up with a new idea saying that, okay, now let's recycle the whole thing. Forget about this clean energy and all that kind of nonsense. So let's start recycling the waste, nuclear waste. So what is the nuclear waste? You feed in uranium, you get out plutonium, that's the waste, and you start recycling plutonium. So they established another huge, massive reactor, kind of a white elephant called thought. Now what happened to thought? This is again common sense. I mean, even a donkey has another dog knows these things. So in order to run thought, you need enough plutonium, right? So which means you need to run these reactors to produce enough plutonium to get thought going. So that's the way you recycle waste. You see, I don't see any of those things coming up in those documentaries, in any of these documentaries that I've seen. So there are huge, massive issues. It's not just the radioactivity, the waste, the pollution, the establishment. The very understanding of what energy itself is all about. The kind of understanding that all of us need to have about energy. The earth is simply awash with energy. Why are we so hell-bent on non-renewable sources of energy? A reactor that just lasts for 25 years and leaves behind a legacy of 25,000 million years of radiation, and you don't even know, you have the technology to decommission a reactor, you know how to build it, but you don't know how to decommission it? What bullshit? Where do you get all that from? Who's telling us all this? So the whole debate has to start all over again, and generations, I think, down the line probably have forgotten these things. They need to be reminded across the globe. I don't know where we're going to start and when we are going to start the whole thing, debate again, all over again.
The next question is, did the film leave you with any unanswered questions about nuclear waste? Was there anything you wanted to learn more about? Was there anything you decided to look more into after watching the film?
Obviously, it focused on the seas. So my understanding is that nuclear waste is also stored on land as well. So I don't know much about that either. So it'd be nice to find out more about that topic as well.
Being in the center of the continent, I think that's one of the reasons why some of the information surprised me, where, here I know there are nuclear waste sites that family has protested, dump sites. I'm familiar with the land-based disposal methods and what happens here, but I wasn't familiar with the total insanity of dumping in sea because of my geographical location. I don't know if anybody knows of another documentary or where we could go to share more information. I can definitely, find what I've known for decades now and share it. And a lot of that disposal is done in the middle of deserts and especially dumped on people of color down in the deep south or dumped on indigenous populations here. So there's a whole horrific racist element to the dumping sites, and actually called sacrifice zones. Give us a sacrifice zone. That's it's appalling.
Yeah, we even have a city named DuPont out here between two highways. It's gross. It's so bad. Yeah, but I was wondering about the mechanisms of the sea to heal itself, because I know a little bit about the land recovering in Chernobyl from the mycorrhiza and the borers, which is just delightful to learn about, but I don't know anything about what the ocean does and what creatures turn that over in the sea. I would be very happy to learn about that.
Yeah, me too. That was the main question that I had from the film. I know they touched on it a little bit about what the effects were on the sea life, and they showed the crab that had damage to its reproductive cells. And I really would be curious to learn a lot more about what the effects are on the life in the ocean.
And what the natural microorganisms like the mycorrhizae on land are able to do to protect that biological community or to react to that. I would be fascinated, but I don't know anything.
Arati, was there anything that you would like to learn more about?
Yeah, I think mine was similar. I also wanted to know the impacts on sea life, especially since they like showed us the crab. I was wondering if there are like any other animals, like how far has it gone? Like how has it altered their like genetic material if it has, and like what can be done.
So the next question that I had was, are you aware of any nuclear facilities or nuclear waste disposal sites near where you live? So for me, I always knew that there were some nuclear facilities a couple hours, I believe, to the east of where I am. But I did some more research into it after watching the film and learned that they're proposing to dump the nuclear waste in a couple places. They haven't decided on a site yet, but one of them is about 2 hours north of me. And they basically right now are storing it in like a temporary place, at like a temporary facility. So they're looking for a more permanent home for this nuclear waste. There were apparently some plans, some people wanting to put nuclear waste experimentally in under granite somewhere, but that got shut down because the community was opposed to it. So yeah, I've just kind of started down the road of researching what's happening with nuclear near where I am. So I'm curious if anybody else knows about more detailed information about what's happening with nuclear where you're at.
Yeah, no, not far from us, there's a dump site called, well, it was an old facility called Rocky Flats that was shut down and was turned over into a wildlife refuge. And that's just a whole mess of crazy. And partially as a result of that, I mean, and some other things, of course, the government had to open up a program where by which energy workers could be remunerated for all the harms. And yeah, everybody got paid out. Nobody more than the corporate facilitators who paid for the park, whatever that means, and designed all the recovery stuff. You know, of course, they made out like nobody else. But that's not too far from here.
Yeah. Rocky Flats is where they were making nuclear triggers, and it's a horrendous mess. I'll just piggyback on you, Trinity, if that's okay. One of the most tragic ones here is a place called Valmont Butte, which is in Boulder. It was 3 points away from being declared the highest level of ecological devastation. And one of the ways that it was discovered that there was nuclear waste being dumped up there was because there were sweat lodges being held by the indigenous people, and the people that were tending the fire were breaking out in boils. One of the local publications, the Boulder Weekly, did a 9-part series about Valmont Butte, a Superfund site. That's what it was, 3 points away from being declared a Superfund site. There was some kind of backdoor mess going on, and their solution was to rock the whole site in and claim that there was no drainage coming out of there, that nothing was draining out of the site. So this place that was sacred to the indigenous people here was dumped on, devastated, and then rocked in. And there's nuclear waste in there, and they're claiming that nothing's happening to the population at this time. The psychological as well as the physical impact of that just wrecked me. I dropped into a coalition that actually nominated that series for a Pulitzer Prize. It didn't win that year, but yeah, that's that and Rocky Flats and farther south, what's happened to especially the Dene and what's happened down there, I'm aware of.
So the documentary was quite personal to me on some levels because Sellafield, which was covered at the end of the documentary, is about 120 miles or 180 kilometres from where I live as the crow flies. I'm in North Wales and it's in north of England. And on looking that up, also found out there's Anglesey, there's a 70 miles away, 105 kilometres away. There's one that got decommissioned in 2015 and they were trying to recommission it, I don't know, build a new one with Hitachi. And I didn't know this, but it got cancelled last month, which was a positive. For how long, whoever knows. So that was one thing that I learned from the documentary was that when we go to the coast from where I am, which is only 45 minutes away, to the beach, that's the Irish Sea. So that's where they've been dropping this waste. It's only about 50 miles, 70 kilometres from this decommissioned plant. So it's going to maybe take a little bit of the fun out of my seaside trips from now on.
Well, one or two things that I would like to say, one or two things in the sense, in Europe, for example, Germany has said that it's going to phase out by 2030 all the reactors. I do not know whether that promise is going to be kept. But on the other hand, I'm from India, and I've been involved in activism for many, many years, and I don't see that happening in India at all, in anywhere in the near future, because India has actually doubled the number of reactors from 12 to 24. So, and the most recent one is actually less than 100 kilometers by air distance from where I live. 6 reactors into the the Bay of Bengal, into the sea, and using Russian technology. So where this is all, and what had happened was, in a country like India, many things are quite easy to be. I mean, the state can get away with even crime and murder and all that. And probably many of the other countries as well. And so what has happened is the very first reactor, when it was commissioned after a few years, in fact, it triggered almost an earthquake and killing many scientists inside the reactor, and also burning down several villages in the vicinity. So this is along this coast, and you have quite a number. You have, in fact, any number of fishing communities, fishing villages along the coast. So all this has been hushed up. There's been a huge cover-up, and it is going ahead with the rest of the 5 reactors. So nothing is actually known, and no electricity has been generated so far. So that's where India stands right now, and many more such reactors are coming up all over the place. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's terrible to hear that that's happening. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone have anything to add, or shall we move on to the next question?
Well, there are no nuclear facilities like up till now in Nepal, so that is not much of a problem. But yeah, as far as I know, they're trying to mine some, like there have been talks about mining uranium, so that might be a problem in the future. So yeah.
Okay. So what overall impression did the film leave you with? Did it motivate you to do anything? Did you feel a certain way after watching it? What did you take away?
I was shocked about the British Isles. I came away thinking, whoa. I mean, I thought I knew about the barrels, right? I had no idea that the Isles had. So there's this project that somebody made where they made a map of the world, and then they made like pictures of all the nuclear explosions that have happened up to this point. And if you look at it, it's totally shocking. I mean, when I saw it, it's so devastating to see the scope, the scale. And the countries just blow themselves up, not really hitting each other anymore. That happened like twice, and now we're just blow ourselves up. And so all along the eastern slope, it's just red hot from Nevada all the way to the Great Divide. It just glows. Right, but I had no idea that it was the same for the British Isles in the water. That made me really understand that this, so if I didn't already, the planet is a fishbowl, and that it is in real trouble. That it's everywhere. That it's absolutely everywhere. I came away a little stunned, a little dazed.
But for me, I guess it was informational and a bit inspiring. And as I said before, like how the activists were actually risking their lives to just get this information across. And the other thing was like when I was watching the part where they were showing the pipes and the barrels, and what actually struck me at that moment was that you're a filmmaker, Julia, right? So you know how difficult it is to actually get footage like that. And in this particular case, how risky it was just to get the videos, and I was, well, this is the level of risk that people are taking just for information and for the activism. So yeah, whenever I think of those things, like that is pretty much inspiring for me. So it's inspired by this movie.
Yeah, I also want to add that I found it pretty inspiring that people were taking upon themselves to do the measurements, because they talked about how like the journalists would only dig up, they won't at the surface level, they won't go down deep, and since nobody else was doing the work, they were doing it themselves, which I thought was quite inspiring.
Maybe I'm a cynic, but I just found it quite depressing in many ways. Again, I said earlier I wasn't surprised, but it constantly does, I suppose it's re-traumatizing in a way, constantly watching this kind of on film, how much industrial civilization is bombarding the earth, and how like almost nowhere is free of being polluted or poisoned or murdered. So yeah, I didn't have a huge amount of optimism from it. I was just a bit, it's just a bit of just a constant reminder, just another reminder and another little fact of what we're doing to the planet.
I came away feeling gratitude towards the filmmakers, kind of a core of despondency and depression around the situation. And I feel like this conversation has somehow pulled me in the direction of listening to what I know of about what mycelium tries to do with nuclear waste is pull it out of the environment into your own body, sequester it, and remove it for the health of the community. And somehow, remembering that bit that we know about what the natural world does in the Chernobyl areas makes me think that, yeah, it's worth it getting those barrels out of that ocean. And obviously, the only direction to take is to shut down nuclear industry altogether. You can't permit this to continue to happen and expect to be in this fishbowl and still be alive, like Trinity just said it. So the encouraging things for me are the dedication of the filmmakers and getting out there and doing real work and giving this as the information, and then conversation that we just had, and trying to spin off of that into some kind of responsible human reaction to what's happened, and not to just like sink into the despondency and into a feeling of helplessness, which is really hard not to do.
Yeah, by the way, Greenpeace also, in fact, I think arguably had the first martyr, person who sacrificed his life, the photographer, fighting against the nuclear industry, by the Secret Service, the French Secret Service in the Pacific, the French atoll in the Pacific. And the Rainbow Warrior, the first ship bombed in the Auckland docks way back in 1981. And the photographer could have actually escaped, but he said he would go down and, sacrifice his life for. So Greenpeace, again, in that sense, has come up with had the first martyr fighting against the industry. And then, again, there are many people who have sacrificed their lives. It's not just Greenpeace alone. You must be aware of that. That's very, very important across the globe. In any number of activists and, right-thinking people, extremely committed, bold, brave, and courageous who have sacrificed our lives, not just against the nuclear industry, but also against similar issues, dams, and missile ranges, and all kinds of, you just name it, all kinds of things. So it's also equally important to remember those people as well, and, across the globe. That was the last thing I just wanted to say. Thanks. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks everybody for coming and for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, Julia. Great questions.
This is Max Wilbert, one of the hosts of the Green Flame podcast. I want to thank you for listening to our show and let you know a few ways that you can support the Green Flame. First, you can subscribe to our platform using the podcasting system of your choice. We're listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pocket Cast, and all the rest. We're even on YouTube. Leaving us a positive review or rating on these platforms helps us reach a larger audience. You can also share these shows with your friends. If you're interested in donating to support the production of the Green Flame, please visit deepgreenresistance.org. And finally, the goal of this show is to activate people. So if you really want to support this show, start organizing in your own community. Thank you again for listening.